Editing an image with a lot of green in kind of a dark area with water flow can be challenging. And as I was reflecting on a recent visit to this waterfall, it occurred to me that there is a lot of color cast with the sun shining through and all of that green. Everything has taken on a bit of a color cast. So I thought I'd give you an example of how I would edit this image. So the first thing that you'll notice is that I have a lot of blue areas in between the rocks and things that I've underexposed this image in order to keep all of the detail up here in the green area. So the first thing that we really want to do is probably correct the color and then get rid of these clipped darks. So rather than going to blacks right away and pulling that up, which would work, it will give it kind of a flat matte appearance. So I don't really want to do that. What I do want to do is use the brush, and we're going to just select the brush with the new mask, and that is where we will change the black. So we're going to pull that up just a very little bit, and we're going to pull up the shadows. The shadows are, the shadow slider is a little more forgiving. So let's see if we've got enough. Oh yeah, that should work. And yet it really doesn't affect the rest of the image. So that is much better. I'm going to put that back for now. The next thing I want to do, because I still have that arrow showing that the darks are clipped, I want to pull the exposure up just a little bit. Now you can see that some of the whites are starting to clip as well, but we're not going to worry about that at the moment. We'll go back here to shadows, lift that up just a little bit so we have a little more detail. And maybe bring the whites and the highlights down just a bit, and probably the exposure as well. We just don't want those highlights clipping. Now because we still have this area where the darks are showing to be clipped, what I'm going to do is pull the blacks down and make them really evident where it's clipping, and go back to the brush. And we can use the same brush that we used before, I think, and go over all of these areas that are showing to be clipped. Sometimes the pixels that are clipping, the areas are so small that you can't really see them. So by increasing the blacks and really making them show, it's much easier to go back and reduce those clipped areas. And there's a little more down here. Okay, so let's let go of that. Let's put the blacks where they were again, and it looks like we're good. So the next thing that's kind of bothering me about this is these dead ferns up here and all the dirt area that I got in this. Now I took this image several years ago when I was at this location, and although I have the waterfall on the rule of thirds, which is desirable for our eye, the rest of the composition really does not work for me. So I'm going to crop that. I'm going to bring this in and up on this side, and I want to keep these fern leaves in the image, so I'm going to pull this up a little bit as well. I'll leave just a little bit of this ridge at the bottom, the ferns, and although we can see a little bit of this dirt area, I'm not too worried about that. I like that comp much better, and the waterfall still has a nice location within the frame. we can take care of that. The next thing I want to do is address the colors in the frame. The greens up here are a little neon for me, a little too yellow. So I want to go to the color mixer, actually, to the yellow, and we're going to pull that down just a little bit and darken the luminance a bit as well. Taking out a little bit of saturation and darkening just a bit. Now I think these yellows are a little too blue, so I'm going to pull down the hue toward the warmer side, like that. Now I'm going to go to the greens, and the greens will be a little tricky because we have greens here, greens down on the moss, in the moss on the rocks. So let's desaturate those just a little bit, and we're going to darken those also. And I think I'll make these a little bit warmer, a little more yellow, and pull down that saturation actually quite a bit. And now I've decided that instead of taking out the luminance, let's see how pulling it up looks. Brightens it up just a little bit. Keep it about at 15, and now I feel like the saturation is a little too much, or the desaturation. Let's pull that back up a bit. So when you're working with greens, it's good to try the sliders in different directions. And the next thing I want to do is kind of check on the white balance. So if I go to the waterfall and I check in an area that has data, I can see that the reds are at 77.5, the greens 78.5, and the blue at 82. This should all be pretty much the same number because it's white. So when I click on that, let's see what happens. Over in the temperature white balance scale here, we have 4,500 for temp and plus 27 for the tint. So let's see what happens when we click on this in a neutral area. So that warms it up quite a bit and increases the tint as well. I'm not really sure I like that. Let's go down and compare side by side what we're looking at. So clearly this image is too blue, but now this image is a little too warm for my taste. Now you may like it, and that's fine. But let's bring that down just a little bit. I think down at about 5,000 is going to be about right for this image. Now what I don't like, again, are these dead ferns. So let's go to the orange, and we'll desaturate those a bit and darken them, because that'll really help subdue that color. So I think that looks pretty good. One other thing, and I hope that you all used your polarizer on this. This rock has way too much glare on it for me. So I'm going to use a brush and try to subdue that glare just a little bit. Now you remember we did the brush with the mask here for the darks. So now we have to create a new mask, also with the brush, and this time we're going to pull down highlights and a little bit of the whites and see if we can get rid of some of that glare on this rock. It's pretty strong, and we don't want to take it out entirely. It gives dimension to the rock, and that's certainly okay. By using the polarizer, it would have been controlled just a little bit better, I think, but that looks a little better. The other thing that I want to do is add another brush, and I want to darken the leaves and brighten these leaves in this fern right here. So I'm going to increase saturation, new brush, increase saturation, and color over it a bit. down here. So that's pretty subtle. I'm going to go a little farther and then darken just a little bit so that it adds more color. They're not so washed out. Probably do that here as well. Again, if I would have had my polarizer on, adjusting this, probably those greens would have come out much nicer. The next thing I want to do is just pull this brightness down a little bit, because our eye immediately goes there, and really we want the viewer to look at the waterfall. So we'll add another mask, and this will be a linear gradient, and I'm going to pull this down right here, and let's see, and then taking the exposure down just a little bit. It still is bright and noticeable, but it doesn't draw our eye quite as much. We'll pull the highlights down a little, the whites down a little, and then because I want to keep the dimension in all of this greenery up here, I'm going to use a little bit of clarity there and a little bit of dehaze, and then I think maybe that is a little too dark, so I'm going to pull it back up just a bit, and I think that's a little better. So we can release that. Still feeling like the shadows are a bit dark. I'm going to pull that up even more, and I'm not quite sure where those blacks are. Let's try this again. See where those first blacks pop up. And we'll go back to our mask, the first one, and address these additional blacks, kind of scattered all over, just little areas, but we don't want any clipping. If we're going to be possibly printing this, we want to make sure that we don't have any blacks that are clipping. And let's see how that worked. Oh, we still have some here, but not nearly as bad. So I would keep doing that process over and over. If I were going to print this, I would continue to look for those blacks that are clipping. But I hope this gives you an idea of controlling the contrast, controlling the green cast, and give you an idea about how to edit this location. After looking at the edit that I completed in the previous portion of this video, I decided that the image was still just too dark. It just didn't have the pop that I wanted it to have. So what I did was I came in and used a radial gradient in the center, and I lightened it quite a bit. I lightened it up to a +40 on exposure. Then if you hover over the 3 dots here, you can click on duplicate and invert mask. And what that will do is keep all of the edits that you've done within the radial filter, but now by doing that, it will give you the reverse. So now we have the outside edge that we're doing. So here was the inside, and here is the outside. And for the outside, I pulled back the exposure 69, which is quite a bit. that gave me an ability to have the viewer really focus on the center part of the image. I also went back and tried to get rid of a few more blacks too. So looking at this now, you can see your eye wants to come into the center. It wants to follow this little trail. Looks like I have a little clipping there I need to fix. And but keeping the outside edge darker helped. So let's take a look at these side by side. Now that this is the very end edit and the very beginning. So it was dark because we wanted to preserve the highlights. It was a blue-green, which wasn't really appealing to my eyes. Some people like a very blue-green, and that is great, but for me, I like a warmer green. So now we have an image that has the highlighted area in the center that really pulls your eye in, and we've got the darkened perimeter here. I desaturated these dried fern fronds a little bit and tried to focus more on pulling the eye right through the middle here to our waterfall. So sometimes it's good to go back and look at an edit. Even when you think you're finished with it, go back and make sure that it is exactly what you want, and keep tweaking it a little bit to arrive at that image that will really make your heart sing.